How do you feel about the state of cosmology? Do we need a new cosmology, or should we return to the old one?
Well, yeah, I guess there's no surprise. I think we need a new one, because the old one is, as far as I can see, is relying on elements that can never be cleanly falsified, like dark matter. You can just keep going on forever, inventing new and exotic ways to define it, and things like bent space that cannot even be seen. So I think philosophically the standard model is not very good, and there's an incredible amount of evidence against it. So I have this rule that if the things you have to invent to put into the theory are a significant amount of what's already in the theory, then you should think again about the theory. And I think about 5% of the universe is known, and the rest of it is invented. So the percentage is way up now. So I think it's time for a rethink.
To me, I also believe we need a completely new cosmology based on completely new foundations. I agree with Mike that if you say that the whole visible universe is only 5%, that cannot be the case. To me, it is what we have.
For me, both things should be explored. Both we should keep all ideas to explore more, to give more possibilities for the Big Bang to be to try to explain the present day data, but also new ideas should be explored. And also, I think there should be room for some skepticism as well, and the idea that possibly we will never reach a cosmological model describing the whole universe. This idea that we are our science can do everything, and we are so powerful that we will get the final theory of everything. Maybe we should be a little bit more humble, I will say, and just realizing that it's a very difficult enterprise, and possibly we will never reach a complete theory of the universe. So we should keep also this in mind.
I'm going to go slightly different here. I'm going to say that actually I think we need to focus on something more concrete, which is really galaxies. I think that when you look at the universe, generally what we observe are galaxies. Okay, we can see stars in our nearby, but generally it's galaxies, and it's trying to get a model of how galaxies would form and evolve that fits into what we see. Well, for me, is a better starting point. I think the problem is changing the cosmology is such a big task. It's so big and it involves so many things that for me, a starting point is, can we agree on a model of how galaxies form?
I like changing the scope of the question, because no, I think that that's actually really valuable, because the next question that I was going to ask is whether or not you think that cosmology as the story of the birth of the universe is actually a scientific endeavor or something that belongs elsewhere, like in philosophy or in mythology or literally anywhere else. Like, it's a very unique time in history that we have taken the story of the birth of everything, the formation. We've tried to take the question of why is there something rather than nothing and put it into a scientific frame. And sometimes I find myself wondering if many of the difficulties we have are not due to the fact that we are trying to apply a very particular style of scientific reasoning to a question that is distinctly resistant to a scientific enterprise.
Do you want to go back this way or start the other end?
Let's keep the order, though. Just I think we should roll it back to the other end. Otherwise, things get crazy.
Yeah, I don't think it's being done as a science at the moment, cosmology, but I think it should be done as a science. So it should be subjected to lab tests far more than it is. It's very much a passive thing where you look at the cosmos and you an astrophysicist try to explain what's going on, but there's very little scope for experimental tests in the lab, although they are looking for dark matter, that's true. So I'd like to see more theories that can be tested in the lab. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do as well.
So you think that cosmological questions absolutely can be answered by science?
Yes, to a certain extent, but
where does that extent lie?
well, I kind of agree with my colleague there, in that. So the more we understand about the universe, the more we're able to control it with our technology, and more we become part of that universe as we become more powerful. So there's a certain point at which we would have to start predicting ourselves. So that would then become impossible. It'd be more like an economic theory then, where you change the thing that you're predicting and you can't then predict it. So I think that's the limit.
So, Anastasia, I would say that we can try to answer these questions about the origin of the universe as a whole. If there is an origin, or if people like myself, to me, there is no always existing, but we can ask these questions, no problems. But I would go with Gareth that we should also deal with more close to us problems, like the origin, as he said, of a galaxy, a spiral galaxy, but even closer, the solar system. We talk about the solar system, there is this old, it began with Laplace, a nebula which contracts gravitationally and so on. But I already read some books. There is one, for instance, by a colleague of mine, now retired from my university, a great historian of science, Roberto Martins, who wrote a book about the formation of the solar system, beginning with Laplace and modern theory. But you see so many problems that we observe that none of the theories presented up to now, just like with the Big Bang, there are so many problems unsolved, things which simply go against the models. And people try to patch, which is also a valid possibility, but sometimes it's necessary completely new. But even not only the universe as a whole, but even our own solar system. When we see the details, not this general idea that was a nebula due to gravitation, and then it was spinning, and that it contracted, it did spin fast, and so on. Why do the sun have so much mass, so much angular momentum, and so on, and the details, and so when you see the details and the observations now with these spacecrafts, which goes all over the solar system and even beyond, they simply falsify most of these models. So we needed to make patches, or sometimes, just like in a conference like this, there are conferences on the solar system, which people, they don't agree. Many details. But we can also ask the universe as a whole and more specific problems.
Cosmology has some part of science, it's a scientific activity, but it's a special science within physics. It's not comparable to other branches of physics. It has some implications for our even philosophical implications for the meaning of our existence in the universe, and trying to find the origin of everything is in somewhat is mixed also with some purposes of the religion or the philosophy, and this is the reason why cosmology is not something totally new. There were all civilizations have some cosmology or cosmogony, you can call it. No, it's not something proper of our time. Coming to your question, if I think that we live in a special time, well, this is something that everybody feels that we are now present in the present in special times, but all times are important for science and for culture. Yes.
Well, the thought was not necessarily do we live in special times, but is it with the moment that seems unique is that we have given the question of the origin of everything to science rather than to religion. right? Because
the first time that happened was maybe in the 1970s. Seriously, like you actually see cosmology departments appearing for the first time. And I think the question is that actually is that a salient path? Like, is that a promising path to turn over cosmology from the mystics and the priests and the mythologists and the artists to the scientists? Are the scientists up for the task?
Right, because so I think so. The model that we have for the way that this works is that, or at least the one that I have, I don't know if this is Shiloh's, is that humans have always needed a mythological, mythopoetic relationship to the origin of everything. You must have the cosmic egg that hatches, that gives birth to the snakes and the waters and the woman and the river, and then like everything comes from it. And all of a sudden you have these stories that you tell about how we came to be here. And as we become progressively more and more scientific and rational, we look back on those stories and we say, well, that is mythology. That is not something that we carry with us into the future. And yet, it seems like any cohesive system of knowledge requires a story of the egg. And so science is stuck with a human brain that demands this origin story, that demands the birth of the universe, because it's had a birth of the universe for as long as we have been human. Like every single culture has one. And so now science is having to stand there and to say, well, I guess there was a birth of the universe. It was called the Big Bang. And so, like, can science actually get away from that?
Well, I have. Go ahead. Yes, to finish. I'm a scientist, and I think as a scientist, I'm not against science, of course. I'm very proud of being a scientist in the Western society. But from a neutral position, we have to admit that science is just one of the possible manifestations of our culture. Science is not everything. So we have, yes, we have some representation of the cosmos. We can give some answers in terms of religion, in terms of philosophical ideas, metaphysical ideas, and science is one of the possible ways to approach to our representation of the cosmos. This idea that science is the solution for everything, especially for questions that go beyond sometimes the limits of science, like cosmology or many other topics that are in the border of what is science and what is not. Well, this is something discussable. I have a high respect for other cultures, other civilizations. I don't agree that the relativism, this kind of relativism that all ideas about the universe are valid. No, there are ideas that are correct and there are ideas that are wrong. And our science, as far as I know, is the most powerful tool that we have to approach to this reality. But we should not overestimate the value of our science. Science does not mean the way to the truth. There are some prejudices in the way how science is applied. It's not a perfect method. Science is a product of human beings and dominated by some irrational forces in our society. We have been discussing today in this morning when you talked about the human factor. Well, this human factor is very important in the building of a science. Why people is now everybody going to the Big Bang? Because there is money in the Big Bang, and there is more possibilities to survive in the system within this area. Well, this is what dominates science in this, and the science is we should not separate science from the human beings. Everything is together. Our science is not perfect. Our science is human, and is another possible way, a manifestation of our culture, our reaction as society to some primitive ideas of curiosity of what is the origin of the universe, is there an origin, there was a creation or not. Well, these are very old problems for which we give our new solutions, but I'm not totally convinced that this will be the solutions forever, that we will get the final solution forever, and it will be the end of the discussion of cosmology.
Well, that's a deep question in there. I kind of think if you ask the question, does cosmology need to have an egg? the beginning, I would say no. That's kind of a human trait. Comes back to what Martin was saying. There is human aspects that go into it. There's nothing wrong with a cosmology that just describes the universe that we see, with maybe an understanding of how it came to that stage, but not necessarily that there was a beginning. I know for some people that's uncomfortable, and that's also, again, a human thing, that we need this, yeah, but where did it come from? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think also the idea that science can produce the one solution that describes everything is a fallacy. Like it's when you paint a painting. Like, no one makes a perfect painting. You always make a mistake. There's always something that you look back and you go, I wish I'd done that differently. And in that sense, science is no different. It's a collection of many minds working together to build something to describe the way it is, attempting to explain the unexplained in a way that makes sense to us at this time. Whether it makes sense to us in 100 or 1,000 years, that's a different question. Like, our understanding will have changed. But I also think what you said, that it's one of those things that you're never going to know everything. I kind of feel that the more that you dig, the deeper it goes, and the more questions you will ask. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the pursuit of science. But I don't think it needs to have an origin story. We just have ended up with that, and there's nothing wrong necessarily with that. But I don't believe that cosmology necessarily has to have it.
So we had a couple of meetings before this conference, just the speakers, and actually Eric Lerner said something really profound in one of the meetings. He said, and this is the father of the Big Bang never happened, and he said, the worst thing we could do is replace one dogmatic perspective with another. And I totally agree. I think that overcoming, there's a lot of people who would like to see changes in whatever their particular pet subject matter is. What is it that we can do as teachers, as scientists, as curious people discussing these matters to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes that we've made in the past with respect to dogmatism and scientism? How do we keep that spirit of open inquiry alive in the future so we don't just keep making the same mistake over and over?
This is a new question.
It is a new question. Pass it back. You want to add to that?
I may reopen the can of worms again later.
So I think the university system possibly should be changed, because at the moment people are rewarded and promoted for generating funding for their departments. So there's a kind of tendency in science to go for big science and big solutions, and also to agree with the crowd, so you can hop on and progress that way. So I think universities should be designed a little bit more like they used to be, where curiosity is rewarded, and there aren't millions of pounds of funding available for dark matter searches, that sort of thing. So I'd like to see that done. I think that would ensure more curious science and a better ecosystem, more varied pursuits.
Well, I think this is a good point, Shiloh. I would, in my answer, go to biology, not to cosmology, because one of the authors I like the most is Stephen Jay Gould, biologist of Harvard, died recently, and so on. And also, I'm not a biologist myself, but I love Darwinism and evolution and so on. And in any of his books, different chapters, he talks a lot about the history of biology and the ideas in biology. And he shows over and over again important biologists, heads of departments, the main figure, they make so many mistakes. And that later on, one generation, and they change completely. That seems so established scientifically. And then, many times, he shows how bad these mistakes are for the society, because sometimes they impose some racist or any kind of and impose that upon the society by authority, just like a religion or politics, but also science. And so I like very much this approach of the history of science, because when you study and teach your students about the history in any subject, mathematics, anything, there are so many things which change completely. In the physics, we had Aristarchus of Samos. The sun is in the center. 2,000 years later, that changed. Now Copernicus. They were against the vacuum, the atomists, Democritus. 2,000 years later, that come back. And so I like very much the style of Stephen Jay Gould, because he shows it. He's a specialist. He knows firsthand. And he even shows mistakes that he himself has made. And so that makes us humbler and more sympathetic to others, and to avoid, especially to force one point of view upon the society as a whole.
I love it.
We cannot avoid the errors that new generations will have, because they will repeat, of course, the same errors. But of course, we can give some advices. Some people may think that they might be correct. One is don't trust the authorities. Just follow. Be a free thinker. Don't follow the mass, the herds. And also, and this will be an advice for the people who administrate science, for politicians of science, they are giving a much connection between science and technology and money. We should not depend so much on the budgets on the technology, because otherwise we are always worried about our position or getting a postdoc or so on. We should give more freedom for researchers to choose their topics, and not to depend so much to be career makers in a simple word. Now we have a system in which everybody is running because they want to make their career. They don't worry so much about the quality of their science. We should get rid in science of these elements. And in my opinion, this is disconnecting a little bit science from economy, which is something impossible nowadays. I know I am asking a utopia, but this is if you want to stop the decline of science, you have to stop this techno science at some point, I will say.
How do you? Sorry, I have to ask you to follow up. How do you decide who to give the money to without some sort of evaluation in an objective sense?
No, I have not decided. The thing is,
Lottery, I love it.
my opinion is not politically correct. I know, and many scientists will disagree with me, but I think there is too much money in science. Too much money in science attracts too much people, and too much competition, and too much, and this is not efficient. It's better a science with less people, more.
If only we were already wealthy barons and we could just work like Huygens in his tower laboratory with our marble columns, and it would be nice. Yeah. No, I think that it is a problem. I wish I knew the solution.
At least for the discussion of ideas. I know the experiments are very expensive, and they need a lot of manpower and all these things, analysis of data. But for discussing about cosmology, why do we need thousands and thousands of astrophysicists just trying to understand the equation of a state of the dark energy? But this is not useful for the society, and it's creating a pressure of people just to go in the direction where the money is. So it's better to have few people, less money, and another model for doing science is what I'm saying. The model, the present day model, this capitalist science, is what it is, and it's not working because the purpose of our science is not creating chasing the truth. The purpose is creating a movement of money, creating employment, and all these things. If people is happy with this, well, it's fine. But for me, it's not the golden time of science. What I mean, and we should be aware of this. We should realize which is the problem in science.
Interesting.
So I'm going to go slightly different on this one, and that's more because I obviously don't work in academia, and I think my approach is probably a much longer term approach. But certainly the problems that I've seen from teaching is what we're asking students to do is removing the freedom, I think, that science should offer you. It's the curiosity to explore and try and make understand the things around you. Like even the simple experiment that we were doing earlier with Andre. I mean, stuff that you never really think about that actually is really important to think about. And part of the problem is we don't have time. Like the education system is built on the fact that you want to push the students through as quickly as possible, and it's the end result that counts. But the problem is that drives a particular mindset, which I don't think is necessarily conducive always to these sorts of thinking, to be able to be big brain thinking, because you're not engendering that in how they're learning. And then you might go to university, you might be lucky enough to get a good professor who does instill that in you. But why wouldn't you want to do that from right at the beginning? That would be my solution to try and remove the dogma, is to create a more open environment where people are curious, and science is just something you enjoy doing. And there is no right and wrong. You're trying to explain the unexplained.
Like a more playful classroom with respect to these things? Is that what you imagine?
Well, that would be one way of doing it, but no, just you don't have time. I mean, I don't know whether it's different in different cultures, but certainly in the UK, you're very much driven and because of the way they changed the curriculum, a lot more stuff came down lower, so you have less time to teach it. So you end up rote learning. So you might do experiments, but you're only doing experiments to prove this equation that you've learned. They're not exploring and finding out why would this equation be and what are the parameters that change it, which is a more intuitive way of learning. But it's back to money again, though. That's the problem.
Getting those marks, getting that job. All right.
All right. Well, we can open it up to the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys want to line up over there at the left-hand side of the stage, and we'll bring you across to speak. Don't trip over the cables, please. We've made it so far without any workplace injuries.
I feel there's kind of a hunger for politics here, which isn't really being addressed. Now, I mean, you did mention capitalism being a problem. Now, for me, the great opposition to capitalism is voiced by Karl Marx. I'm a Marxist. Obviously, Marxism was distorted, and there are huge problems in Marxism. And meet any two Marxists who read and are serious, they're going to have big discussions and disagreements and all kinds of things. So I think if you're going to oppose the careerist money system, you do need a politics which is opposed to capitalism. That's definite for me.
Is this a question?
No, it's a contribution.
Oh, that's not what we're doing here, though. We're asking the panel questions.
Well, I just want to say something quite short, which is I found among the particular political party I was involved in, there were a lot of people, young people reacted against it because a rape by a leading comrade was covered up. And we invented a different way of doing politics in which...
Yeah, what is happening?
Which reminds me of the good conversations I've had here, which is a very playful use of ultimate, origins.
Can you pass the mic to the next person?
I take a leaf from the science fiction of Philip K. Dick in having a humorous approach to the huge questions.
What the hell is going on? This is insane. Dude, we're talking about cosmology here. Ask a question. If you have a political question
I'd like the panel to comment on whether they think a better way of handling cosmology. I don't know if you know Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer, who right at the end of his life wrote The Exegesis, which is a playful, every 3 pages is a completely new idea. But this humorous approach to the big questions, a Dadaistic approach, I think is what is required for the discussion of these ultimate issues, that we realize it's a human game to play and everyone has the right to voice a cosmology.
Does the panel have any thoughts? I have no idea. All right, Eric, do you have a question? Does somebody have a question for these people? Good Lord.
Well, you're the chair, so I'll do what you want, but I think that it would be better to open it up for general discussion. But the issue that has been raised, what people are talking about, isn't it, in fact, a question of where society is going? Isn't the question of whether we are going to decide scientific things on the basis of the scientific method or on the basis of mythology? Isn't this basically the critical question of where cosmology is going to go? Because do people agree, I think some of you do and some of you don't, with the idea that it matters to society whether what we think we know about the universe is determined by science or determined by mythology? And just to clarify, I would say that present cosmology, as Hannes Alfvén said, is a religious mythology, not a scientific theory. But would you agree or would you not agree that the issue of how we learn about the universe is critical to where society is going, and the converse, that where society is going, how we resolve the crisis that capitalism has led humanity, is basic to how we are going to change the way the study of cosmology is done. Is that a clear question?
The question is having a solid cosmology important to the future of humanity?
No, specifically the question is using the scientific method to learn about cosmology versus the mythological method important to the future of humanity? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd say that cosmology and science in general can give us hope, because it can offer the potential for us to get up to the next level, to improve technology, to settle space, that kind of thing. But I think you need both science and religion, because I'm not saying that religion is a delusion, but sometimes people need that aspect to keep on living their lives. So you need both science and religion. I think they go hand in hand. And religion is the same sort of attitude as science, really. It's a curiosity about where it all came from and where we're going and why are we doing it. And I don't think I would ever trust a scientist who is 100% atheist, because I would see that person as being self-limiting. So.
Hey, Skip.
I will speak by both. Yeah, the double. No, about the scientific method. This is a beautiful idea. We should, of course, I agree. Everybody agrees that we should follow the scientific method. But this is what is the ideal thing. But the reality is that scientists do not follow the scientific method. This is the reality. Nobody tells us in the school that for instance, that the money is a very important part of the scientific method. not everything is experiment, making a mathematical model. All these ideas of Galileo, all these philosophers that created the beautiful ideas that not only in science but also in politics. When somebody tells you that the democracy, everybody can be the president of the US. Why not? But is anybody telling these people that in order to get this power, political power, you need money? Because money is a very important element of any democracy, and money is a very important element of the of the science, because we are embedded in a democratic capitalist science, even in China, if you want to compare also. So we should bear this in mind. These are the rules of the game. I'm not claiming this is good or bad. This is the reality, and the reality is that there are other forces that we cannot. Not everything is rational, and not everything is the fairness of the situation. There are very good scientists with very brilliant ideas, but do not get any success, do not get any impact, because they don't have economical support. They don't have, or people do not understand him. He's isolated, so she's isolated. There are many other factors. There are many human factors, what we have insisted, Gareth and me. The other question, I don't remember exactly what was the question. The policies of...
The question is whether cosmology, scientific or
yes,
religion, has an impact on society.
Of course, yes, now I remember. Cosmology has, as I remarked previously, cosmology is an essential part of any culture, not only in our Western society, but any society has a connection with the cosmological idea. It's not something neutral, but I personally, I don't think the cosmology itself, the ideas of cosmology, is connected with political revolutions or with changing our how the society will change. It's more the opposite. The society, the ideas in the society, the political ideas, economical, religious ideas in the society have an influence on how the cosmology is created, but not the opposite. The idea that the cosmology can change our political ideas, you defend it then, but I'm not so clear about that.
I think we have some politicians along this bench here, because I'm not sure that they actually answered Eric's question. I will answer your question, and that is, I agree that cosmology shouldn't end up with doctrine. You shouldn't end up with a theory that can't be falsified. If a theory can't be falsified, that's not science. So there is a clear separation for me between religion and science. But the question is whether you can apply that to the entirety of the Big Bang. That's maybe a different question, but I certainly think in terms of a way forward, absolutely, science should be determining the best way to make sense of it that abstracts away from the idea of something that you don't know. The problem, and the reason why it comes back to potentially religion, is that there is a big unknown. Like if you, and this is why I think it's different. If you have a cosmology that doesn't necessarily have to have a beginning, then you don't end up with this beginning. Because if you have a beginning, then you still have to ask the question, well, what came before the beginning? So that you end up in very much more philosophical discussions, and I guess that's the problem. So ideally, I would say it should be science-based, but I think problems with the limitations we have in terms of data and the human nature of it forces you down this route. I would also just like to comment on Mike that for me, you said you a scientist who's an atheist to you is someone you couldn't trust. So I'm atheist. So
How dare you?
no, but like, so I don't have a religion. I don't go to church. I don't believe in God. But I do believe that there is something else. I can't scientifically quantify what it is, but I separate it from what I do. I think more important though is imagination. I think for me that's a far more important part than having a religion. A scientist needs to be able to abstract away from the everyday nuts and bolts and be able to think outside the box. And whether religion gives you that, or whether other forms of imagination or spirituality, whatever you want to call it, I think that's the important thing for me anyway.
Can I ask a brief procedural question of you guys? In this workshop tomorrow, which you really haven't described, are we going to have a chance to sort of collectively discuss some of these issues?
I think that's the plan as far as I can tell. Patrick is the chair of that section, so you won't have to contend with my tyranny anymore.
Is Patrick here? Okay. So we will have a chance to generally discuss these critical issues. Thank you.
Alexander, you got a question?
He's like,
A
actually, it's
question?
more of a comment.
Contrary to the suspicion, I'm going to ask the mean question Anastasia has failed to address, which is, are we whining a little bit too much about mainstream cosmology, groupthink, and sociology, and so on? Here is a constructive proposal, and I want the radical open data policy. And I invite the panelists to comment on that, how much they hope that could be useful or even change. So I have in mind, call it naive, but put the raw data of every telescope on the internet, but not only. Martin will respond that you need experts to analyze. Yes, but at every stage, please transparent publicly, not only the data, but also the programs, even maybe a hotline that can support, let's say, not everyone, but the skilled individual independent researcher that could verify the results. After all, science has reproducibility as a key element. That's my proposal. I ask for comments about that.
I love the idea of a telescope hotline. 1-800-telescope. There's an astronomer on the other end of the line.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great idea. I was able to start my work way back because of the archive, actually. Because I was able to look at papers on the archive for free, and so I was able to access the data and start thinking about it. And I think that was great. And in recent years, the archive has changed. It's not as open now, so it's harder to see what's going on in the field. So yes, I agree.
My impression is that this would be too ideal to happen at any moment in the future. Sometimes some aspects, publication or some observations, they are nowadays available online, but then others they close, and so that changes from many different situations. This ideal situation, I don't think it will ever happen in reality. Some portions of it, and so.
To avoid the misunderstanding, I don't mean the publications. I mean the raw data of, say, light curves of supernova, and then every step. Yeah.
Even that, I believe this will never happen. Maybe in one situation, in one specific laboratory, one specific university or research institute, but in general, on everything I have seen in the history of science, that will never really happen generally.
Before you pass that along, do you think that won't happen because the technical issues of it are too high, or you think that
many political aspects, financial aspects, geographical aspects, people who did invest so much and will give freely? You see Newton fighting Flamsteed. Oh, give me the data of the moon, but it doesn't happen. No, that's mine. You are utilizing it wrongly. That does not mean that way. Oh no, that instrument. How did you collect that? You need to give me all the. How does your James Webb telescope works in detail? Your atomic bomb, or it will not work because there are military secrets. There are in biology. You can make a biological war and so on, and so all the details they will not give, and sometimes they will give it wrongly on purpose to avoid that others dominate your technology and so on. So in reality, one case or another, but
I do not agree in this. I think it's not something for the future, it's something for the present. Nowadays, we have plenty of data that are publicly available for anybody, for any of you. If you want to have access to James Webb data, for instance, that have been produced 1 or 2 years ago, they are available. Other thing is the difficulty to access to this data. It's not easy to understand how to access. You have to read the instructions, you have to spend several days just trying to understand how to download the data and how to read them. But this is another question. The data are available, and there is one. The reason is not to make the public to make the data available for the general public. The reason is that these big telescopes are paid with the taxes of all the citizens. So nobody is the owner of this data. So there are some rules that after 1 or 2 years, depending on the mission, they have the obligation to release the data publicly, mainly for other scientists, even for other countries. There are countries that have not the GDP of the US. They cannot spend so much money in science, but the scientists working there, they have access to the data after some time. So the data are private for some time. After they make the exploitation of the data, and after that, in most cases, they have the obligation to make the release of the data publicly available, even the raw data. So your dream is already a fact, I think, in this sense. The other thing is that it's very hard. I warn you that if you want to analyze the data, you have no experience, in spite of what you say, you have no experience analyzing data. It's a hard task. It's not so easy. It's not like going to YouTube and watching a video or something like that.
It would be, I mean, it'd be lovely to be able to have access to all the data. I don't disagree. But I also agree with Martin that there is already a lot. I've looked at some of the Gaia data, and there's massive amounts of data in there. It's just, like you say, understanding what each bit means. You almost like one of the labels on your cereal to tell you, warning signs that this is, because basically you have to understand how the data is processed, how they used to calibrate some of that, and that becomes important if you're trying to abstract away back to the raw data. In terms of the supernova light curves, though, I don't know an awful lot about where the data comes from, but I suspect some of it comes from individual universities doing telescope time, and I don't know how that data is then shared, whether that's specific to the report or the project that they worked on rather than the satellite specifically. But yeah, it would be great to have, I would agree.
All right, let's do the next one up.
Okay, so my question follows on from one that was posed from the chair. What, if we wanted to find an alternative to the current paradigm, what would we need to do differently to make that work better? And specifically, I want the panel to concentrate on the infrastructure or mechanisms for disseminating information in the form of theoretical papers or whatever, and looking particularly at the journal system, the peer review system, the preprint publication system, those things. Do we need to change any of that to make new theories more viable?
Yeah, great question. So I think the journal system should be opened up. Even today, the archive, as I said, is starting to limit the people who can submit articles there. And that's not how science used to be before the Second World War. It was you submitted a paper to a journal, the editor had a quick look at it to check it wasn't insane, and then he published it if it was interesting. And now there's a lot of politics involved as well in who gets published. I'm not really complaining about peer review because I managed to get my papers through most of the time, but it has become a lot more difficult. And there has to be a lot more appreciation in universities for diversity of opinion as well, and there simply isn't. So, yeah.
I haven't know specific how it should be or so. My impression is that each scientist tried the best he can with the means available. But these things change depending, as Mike said, sometimes one publication is free, other times it will become paid. Some instruments may be available for some time, that's great. Sometimes they will be, for different reasons, be only for people who have such not only expertise, but permission to utilize some specific equipment and so on. So each one tries his best. I don't know, though, no general way to deal with.
There are many things one should change in order to make this possible. talking about the publications, it's true that it's difficult to publish alternative ideas in cosmology in the main journals of astrophysics, Astrophysical Journal, Monthly Notices of the Royal Astronomical Society, ANA, the main journals. I know some editors, not even the referee, the editors, they read the abstract and they see something like a static universe or something like that, and they reject immediately the paper. They don't even send the paper to any referee. Even if the science is perfect, they don't want this kinds of publications in the main journal. So this is a problem for the development of new ideas. I totally agree. Nonetheless, I think there are ways to publish ideas, even if perhaps not in the main journals, but in second order, third order, second rank or third rank journals. Archive, unfortunately, you are right that in the past, before 2004, it was open to everybody to post any preprint, even amateurs, so anybody could post any idea. It was interesting, but there are restrictions nowadays. Now you need, in order to post a paper in archive, you need the support of a colleague, and it's the same. They are making some referee. Now it's a new referee system. It's not an open system. There is, maybe many of you know, there is some alternative preprint server called Vixra, which is archive the opposite way. The reputation is not very good, I have to say. This means that the professional scientists do not read Vixra. This is the thing. But, well, it's a way for communication of people like many of you that with each other, that possibly there are ideas and you can get in contact with other people with the same ideas. Also, about not only the publications about the conference is the same thing. Most of the conference do not admit ideas like this. This is an exception. I'm very sorry. I'm very glad you have organized this, because this is an exceptional event. This is not the normal thing, and this gives an opportunity for some people to express some ideas and to communicate these ideas, even if the number of people that these ideas can reach is very low. I understand it has not the same impact, but at least they have the opportunity to discuss the ideas. The important thing in any case is that any scientist, anybody creating new ideas in cosmology should not be isolated, should not be just creating the web page and posting the ideas in the web page, because this is not going anywhere. You should contact colleagues, submit to some journal. If it is rejected, to submit again to another journal. Even if you have to submit to 10 different journals, you have to insist again and again. And this is the only way to move in this world. There is not any other way. Or changing totally the system. But this is something that is something about political ideas, as you mentioned, and we cannot modify. I will modify the politics of archive, for instance. I don't understand why archive has to limit the expression of some ideas. Archive is internet. It costs no money almost. Just it's not printing in paper. So why not admitting some ideas? But possibly people complain that there is a contamination of some strange ideas, exotic ideas in physics, and they don't want. They want to preserve archive only for professional physicists. That is a pity. I recognize.
Thanks. Could I ask Patrick a very quick procedural thing? Will you be covering some of this topic in your session tomorrow about dissemination of information amongst this group? Great. Okay.
All of it. Yeah, the only thing I would add is it is really important to document it. I think that's because I've looked at papers on Vixra, and you know they do vary in quality, but like the important thing is, if you have an idea, then it is more important to document so that other people can come and give you other suggestions, alternative ways to interpret it, and that way you cascade the idea system. It's not perfect, I admit, because obviously you want to go through a more scrutiny process, but it's better than nothing. Like you say, like first port of call should be that you're trying to document it so that you can share it with people.
Magic. Question or advertisement?
It's both. It's but mostly a question. I really like how we're already advertising Vixra, because I actually didn't know so much about the philosophy before, let's say a couple of weeks before the conference, and I feel like we can advertise Vixra as a community, because apparently many people are using it. Seems to be a very useful thing. Anyway, that was the advertisement. Then the rest is about my roadmap, which is also an advertisement, of course. I feel like we're already busy. So we're trying to solve here the problem, what can we do? And so my question to you more specifically is, if you had to now choose your biggest frustration or the problem you want to solve as much as possible within this context of that we are in as a non-standard cosmology community, or however you want to call it, so being open towards non-standard cosmology, which biggest frustration do you have that you think is practically solvable by us as a team within quite a short term, and perhaps also long term?
Do you mean a scientific problem that would be good to solve, or kind of a?
I would more aim for structural problems with it, with academia, with everything surrounding it, maybe the politics, maybe the funding, maybe the how we can address the dogma, how we can address. So the peer review was already mentioned. Which one do you think is the most, let's say, useful to approach and the most practical to approach as with the people that we have here?
I think I mentioned it to you the other day, actually, but it'd be nice if there was a journal devoted to alternative science that was peer reviewed, more like a standard journal, because there is nothing like that. And I think Progress in Physics has now. I used to send my wildest ideas to Progress in Physics, which is great because I could get them out. And I think that's now defunct. So it's lacking. So I'd like to see that.
I have no specific answer, but it seems to me that what Shiloh and Anastasia are doing, it's one of the best ways I can see. That just invite people, all fields, no necessarily a specific scientist with degrees and so on, and put that to the world. And so I think that's excellent. You see, and also like a conference like this, I know that there are people who have no degree, they're not even astrophysicists, astronomers, physicists that came, and so that's open. So that to me that's wonderful. So that I think that's one of the best way to spread ideas which are different from the establishment. So.
That's very kind. Thank you.
I mean, I think the goal of this project, real quick interjection, is so that we can all learn how to talk better and exchange ideas. And I think if we all participate, that'll help a lot. I think that's really what you're getting at, is participation, right? Like really living out what you want to see happen in all these fields. And we're all doing our part, but that's the point, really, of getting together and doing this and learning how to hang out with people we disagree with.
I agree. The last two contributions. Indeed, there are many necessities in this field of alternative cosmologies. If we can define this field, we need some specialized journals or some journals which are open to these ideas. We need also some conference like this, inviting perhaps. Oh, sorry, inviting most people. Just to mention another one among the different things, it would be good to have some kind of grants for students for nowadays. For instance, a PhD, some student specializes in astrophysics, a professional one wants to make a PhD in physics, possibly found is no way to do a PhD specializes in alternative cosmologies, because those who give the grants are governed by mainstream cosmologists, and they do not want any of these ideas for any student. So the way to break this trend is just to try to push just some students or postdocs or somebody some grants specializes in this kind of research, and this is the way how it should progress. I think.
So, Martin, what do you think here that will be the most important? Trying to convince students to go for these grants, or trying to convince the grant agencies to enable such grants?
Well, convincing the students will not be very difficult, except for one thing, and many people have this. Many senior scientists have the same opinion. You may jeopardize the career of the student. The student is very has great interest in doing these kinds of things, in alternative ideas, searching for new models of the universe. This is something that attracts a lot of students. The problem is that when the student finishes the PhD studies, has this student opportunity to continue their career doing the same things, or is the end of this career. This is the problem. Many students are aware that trying to do something in alternative cosmology is the end of their career. Nobody will pay them again a new postdoc. So we need to design some career in this way, not only the students, but also the postdocs and these things. And I recognize this is not an easy task. You need an organization, not only in one institute, in many different places, but we should perhaps make some effort to convince, at least not this kind of ostracism against alternative cosmology. This kind of, this student was working into these exotic ideas. We don't want him. We have to try to remove these prejudices, because there are very bright people thinking about new cosmologies. Here we have seen many good ideas, and this is important. We should. This is science also, no? Doesn't matter whether it is wrong or right, whether the Big Bang is better or not. The thing is that thinking. We have to promote thinking within academia.
For me, the takeaway here, as you know, I'm the pessimist. You're obviously the optimist, and I don't think we're necessarily going to solve anything here. But I think the more important thing that we take away from here, and that should continue, is this dialogue. This dialogue is so fruitful because it allows people to discuss things from alternative positions and hear arguments in a more constructive way, rather than why the hell are you bringing me that? What are you on about?
Garrett, to pick up on that, do you think we need to keep the dialogue mostly here, or do we need to transfer it towards also the standard science community? Or do you think that's useless?
I think you could grow this. I think if you push this out too quickly, too much, then it will just be seen as a fringe thing. Oh, it's them lot. But if you can show the value that you can add, then you might be able to use that as a model, that or the event itself or the group or the community gets bigger. I don't know. Like, I am the pessimist, you are the optimist.
So you don't have any creative ideas about how we can perhaps step by step gradually get the message across?
As I said, I'm the
Just
pessimist.
don't
I would say, let's see how this goes, and let's see how this evolves, and then from that, let's work out how you can snowball it to be your pessimistic side.
I think
optimistic side. Sorry.
I think you will be an excellent referee for the roadmap article. Thanks. Great ideas.
Having just heard that last section about the sort of things we have to overcome with our alternative cosmologies and alternative sciences, I've even discovered that I've had a fair amount of success blasting through peer review with extremely radical papers. And the honest answer is nobody's really paying much attention to the high-profile journals anyway, if it's alternative. So that's not really the breakthrough. And I think that's what I'm learning coming here, is that what you're doing, physics by this new kind of medium of YouTube, and I don't even know all the blogging channels that are out there, seems to be a new approach. That's my quick comment, just because it was interesting hearing that last discussion. My question is different, and very quick, I hope, at least to give. I don't know much about AI, But I do know that, having had various discussions here, a lot of people are finding that they're comparing their work to AI. And I don't know how the whole science world is even dealing with, is AI a great benefit? I see it personally as a kind of an averaging technique that's just going to kind of smooth out all the sort of spiky edges of science. And that sounds like a pretty terrible thing if we're trying to promote alternative sciences and alternative cosmologies. So I'm just wondering, what do you think AI is going to do to help us with development of alternative cosmology?
Poor Mike, he's on the end, farthest away from the microphone every time.
Yeah, I've seen some of AI, and it seems to understand quantized inertia really well, which is very impressive. But I think there's a danger in AI, in that more and more we're turning over our thinking to machines, and it begins to sound a bit like Frank Herbert or something. That yeah, people are losing the ability to think for themselves, and I think this will only get worse with AI. And I think it should be kept. It should be perhaps limited. So I'm in two minds about it. Really impressive, but ultimately possibly a
Can
dangerous
it be
road.
limited, though? That's my worry.
So I know absolutely nothing about AI. So my time I give tomorrow in the section that Patrick will be the chair, that someone in the audience who is specialist in AI give us some suggestions of how that might help. So my time is for one or more people, specialists. I have nothing.
Nothing to comment about AI, but about the YouTube videos and other ways to promote science through internet. It's not the same thing. It's not the same public. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have 1 million visitors in one YouTube page if they are not professional scientists. And I mean professional scientists, people who get money with doing this thing. If you imagine you are very successful with your theory and you get a lot of visits of your web page, but you want to professionally earn money with your science. You have no possibility. You cannot present your YouTube video as part of your curriculum. You need to publish in the academic journals to follow the way. Uh, I insist, my opinion is not to go aside the professional science. No, we cannot get cosmology needs the professional science because these are the people who have the resources to build the telescope, to interpret the data, and all these things. We cannot build cosmology aside, just trying to live in a parallel universe, trying to do our alternative cosmology group. No, there is only one cosmology, and we have to. We depend, unfortunately, of the mechanisms of the academia, and the way is just to approach to journals and try to get the scientists, the professional scientists, read these papers. Just publishing in places where amateurs are only watching this is not so useful.
Can I just comment on that, because I think it's important to understand that Neil has published. So I guess the difference in Neil's case is he is published through mainstream journals. It's just that no one is interested in engaging with the theory. So that's like a subtle difference in that respect. In terms of AI, I kind of see it like when photography was introduced and everyone was like, oh my God, art's going to die, it's going to kill all of it off. And it didn't. Like AI is a very useful tool, but it's a tool. It can do many things, but it's a lot of it is based on the human input. So equally, it makes mistakes. It's like sometimes like a child in the way that it behaves, but it can be incredibly powerful if you use it in the correct way. But it can also give you incredibly powerfully wrong answers if used in the wrong way. So it has value, it has a point, and I absolutely think it should be used. It could be a really useful tool to extract data, the data that we talked about before, that is available, and to see whether it can analyze it based on a different cosmology. That's something that could be usefully done with AI. So yeah, I absolutely do see that there is a point in it. but it's how you get it to do what you want it to do. That's the tricky part.
Thanks, Neil. Wayne.
I thought I was going to have the final question here, but it looks like there's going to be another one. I hope this is appropriate for the. Do we need a new cosmology or repair the old one? My question is. We've talked about, we've touched on religion and politics and economic structures, stuff like that. One of the things that's drawn me to cosmology is my place in the universe, the wonder of it all, and the beautiful thing called the Earth. Eric Lerner talked about about some of the challenges that we have as humanity here. I see the Earth as at most a special place with its magnetic fields protecting us from the sun, providing us with water, a temperate zone. I can't even, and even though I see trillions of stars and all, I can't imagine another place existing that is going to be suitable, and especially one that might be happening concurrently. To what extent does the cosmology that we have now, the Big Bang or a new cosmology, foster our sense of wonder and place in the universe? Do we need to revise what we have? Do we need to do something else? I hope that was appropriate for this panel.
Well, I kind of respectfully disagree with your idea that the Earth is unique, because I think we were kind of designed for the Earth, and an alien species living on its planet, which may seem ugly to us, would probably be miraculous and beautiful to it. But
You understand? No. You repeat. You think that we were designed to live on Earth? Is this your
yes, so we have evolved to live on this particular planet.
evolved or being designed?
No, I'm not speaking from a religious perspective.
No, I'm just trying to understand.
No.
Evolution is the new designer,
No,
Assis.
because it was not clear to me.
Well,
I
I was struck actually by how beautiful that idea is, that the place that was the foundation for our eventual emergence is beautiful to us by virtue of having been the ground for our development. Like I'd never thought about it quite like that, and that was very striking to me when you said that. Creation aside, designer aside.
Yeah, so I wasn't talking about intelligent design or anything like that. I don't go for that. But yeah.
No, I don't see particularly anything special on the Earth itself. To me, like Giordano Bruno, there are infinite suns, stars. Now we know galaxies, and to me there are infinite places with life and so on. Places where there isn't, others there are. Different to me. Each one of them is unique in its own place, but each one of them will have different species, any kind of thing. But to me, at least to me.
Since ancient times, humanity was affected by the ideas about the heaven, the cosmos, the empty space. Or many philosophers before any science was produced is about cosmology were giving some existential impression of which is the role of humanity in comparison with the universe. Think, for instance, about Pascal. No, this that he felt so small against these great spaces, empty spaces in the universe. Just the knowledge that we live in such a small planet, in a small star, in a corner of a galaxy, which is something very recent of the last century. This changes our perceptions of ourselves. with respect, for instance, to this idea of that we are the center of the universe. This is a totally different idea, and it affects our perception as human beings, our society, and everything. How this the Big Bang or any other alternative cosmologies may affect, well, it's a topic for a long discussion. Surely, some religious people may interpret the Big Bang in terms of a confirmation even of the creation ideas of in the Bible, the Old Testament, or in other monotheist ideas also. The opposite ideas are not, do not lead necessarily to the opposite ideas, but for sure there is a relationship between the ideas of the cosmology in a culture, the dominant ideas, in our case the Big Bang, and the other the perception of human beings in the integration of nature. There is always a role. There is a feedback between our idea of ourselves is projected in the cosmological ideas, and the cosmological ideas are projected in our perceptions of ourselves. I think there are many historical examples that one can cite that of these things. So cosmology is not neutral. It's not like thinking about the solar physics or the physics of in a laboratory that people do not care. But ordinary people care about cosmology because they feel that there is something philosophical in it, something existential in it.
I mean, I love sci-fi. I love the idea of being able to travel across space to find new solar systems and go there. The reality is what Mike said, I think, is absolutely true. Humans have evolved to live in this environment. And I suspect that even those wanting to go and live on Mars, I suspect might actually be much harder than they think. And what it actually might require to go somewhere else is to allow enough time to have humans develop and evolve in space to be able to cope with that environment, because it's a very different environment to here on Earth. So therefore, when you go to some other part of the universe, what we perceive as us being living things may look very different on a different planet, because there are different conditions, and therefore your idea of them being the same, it wouldn't be the same, and they would equally think that we are so different from them. Your privileged position is always because you're here and everything you see is from this point of view. That doesn't mean that it is privileged from the universe's perspective. It's a bit like relativity, I suppose, but more metaphysical. So yeah.
The speed of privilege is constant, though.
Yep.
I don't know what that means. Sorry.
Yep. So thanks for the diverse responses.
Yeah, Jim.
The great Jim Keller.
Without whom this would not have happened, or would have happened with great delay.
Well, I want to say one thing is, please, YouTuber scientists, keep publishing on YouTube. I love you guys, and it's really valuable. I use information on plasma physics, chemistry. Recently, I've been nerding out on mining. There's a lot of information. It's really cool. Sometimes, like Gareth, like your YouTube videos walk through a thing, but then lead me to go, I didn't know about that, and then I start Googling papers. It's like an entryway drug, but it's really fantastic. And I don't pay for firewall papers ever. There's so much stuff out there, so it's a great channel to do it on. All right, so I have a question. I was just chit-chatting with Anastasia about a little list. So I've been listening for a couple of days, and there's all these splits, like, is the universe driven by gravity or electromagnetism? Is it steady state or expanding? If expanding, is it inflationary or not? Like, there's a bunch of big questions, right? And then there's about 4, I think, different theories of general relativity tweaks just here. So in software, we do something called bounties or tournaments. So if you want a piece of code written, you might say, I want a piece of code written on a Discord channel or some social media thing. And then people can bid on it. That's a tournament. and then you can see who's bidding on it. Because if somebody says I'll do it for $200 and they have like 10,000 software genius points, you're not going to get it, right? But so there's different ways to do it, and sometimes, like my company, we post bounties. It's $100, 200, 500. We post some for 10,000, and people write pieces of code, and if it works, we pay the bounty. I'm wondering if you guys think, if I posted some bounties on physics, like every once in a while I see something like, that's really cool. I'd like a physicist to go do the math of correlating that. Or somebody posts, like there's a great comment the other day. It's like, that's a nice graph, except that graph, if it was on log paper, you'd see a way bigger gap. Like some of these aren't hard, be $100. So do you think young scientists would be into that? Like, hey, was that a yes? Oh, that'd be cool. Well, anyway, my question was for, yeah. Any volunteers, come see me.
Excellent. Already working on the road.
Get the idea, like there's some questions where some calculation would really be helped. And these aren't like staff positions, but they're like, here's an interesting problem. Like Eric Lerner said, well, I haven't studied the correlation of my theory to these galaxies, but there's a big data set out there. Maybe somebody could say, I'll knock off 5.
Well, it's a great idea, and I think some companies are already doing that. So
for physics, in particular,
online companies like Mind and other ones, because I've been looking at them myself. And
oh, really?
They offer jobs, and you can log in and you can offer to do that, and you get paid.
Oh, cool.
So it's a great idea.
I'll get the information from you.
Can you ask them? You can hire questions out.
Well, they set tasks, and then you can volunteer to do them. And
they set the task though, but if Jim has a task for somebody,
well, I could build a software platform where I have a bunch of tasks where I'd pay you $100, $1,000 for it. But somebody else said, "Hey, I have a question." That's a platform. It's attracted people. They could also, who cares who pays the penalty or not? And then over time, you could collect the results of that. That could be part of your conference next year. Here's presentations out from the bounty system. But so there's already somebody that's really cool.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea, and I think many young people, students, laymen, and even some professionals will go for it.
Yeah, cool.
Because that's an incentive, that's money they can support or help, and so I believe different kinds of questions can be asked there, and people would volunteer certainly for that. I think that's excellent idea.
Cool. Okay. All right.
He's full of them.
Yeah, I would definitely go for that. And I would also say that I have questions that I would love someone to be able to crunch some data on. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Well, the system can be kind of regulating, because you might post something and somebody go, well, it'll take me a year. Yeah. Somebody else will say, that'll take me a month. I'm into it anyway. I'll do it for $1,000 just for the labs.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, all right.
The first alternative funding scheme that we've heard tonight. I love it.
There's no point whining about stuff, right?
Hell yeah! All right.
Patrick's do you want to close, or do you have more questions?
Yeah, just an idea to follow up on Jim's idea. Something that I was already thinking about, and this seems
formulated as a question. It's like Jeopardy.
Well, it's first an idea and then a question.
Great job of asking it as a question. I will say. Like, do you think people would be interested?
Do you think? But that's it's not for the panel. It's just for everyone. For tomorrow, for the roadmap. Citizen science is a very popular thing nowadays in science in general, and what Jim was proposing can be done by professionals in academia, or can be done by hobbyists. And I think, I don't know how big of a percentage of the group here are actually working in academia, and how much is just in hobbyist scientists. But I think this is a special conference in that regard. And I think citizen science can really be a very interesting topic to discuss tomorrow. But I was thinking I would be the last one, but not yet. So I was thinking like maybe to end on a positive note, what the biggest risk is that we run as a community in getting marginalized, but that seems a little bit not positive enough. So I was going to reformulate it a bit, maybe like, can you name perhaps a personal struggle or something that you saw from very close in your career that you felt like was really, really troubling you at that moment with regards to getting your message across, or getting accepted within the scientific community, and how you dealt with it, and what you would advise for people in general how to deal with that specific problem?
Mm. Roll the mic back down to Mike.
Well, I suppose in the early days of working on it, I was being ignored, I suppose, quite a lot. But and it was inadvertent as well, but I suddenly somehow made my research useful to somebody, and I got DARPA funding. And instantly all the criticism that I was receiving online, and people were writing to my university to get me fired and things like that, all that stopped when I had the support of DARPA, whatever you think of DARPA. So that's kind of interesting. If you're useful, then you can have unpopular opinions, but if they're useful, you get support.
I would say two things. From the history of science, things always happen and repeat. We can see what did happen with Socrates 2,500 years ago and with Galileo. And so, from 2,000 years from now, it will happen again. But so my thing would be just to let people know how things really are. And but I would like to tell something else, Patrick. As you said, maybe I don't know if Eric will remember, but in 2008, that it was the second Crisis in Cosmology conference in Seattle, USA. I was there, Eric was there, and there was a guy, if I'm not mistaken, his name was David Dilworth. And he mentioned something at that conference, which I never forgot. You began saying that he told me how do science, not science advances, but how things happen when we present an alternative theory in any field. So, as you said, first they ignore you. So there is a second step in which they make jokes out of you. And but then comes a third step, and in which they begin to fight you. And when they see a danger, and so, and then if you are fight good enough, if your idea or if your experiment and so on, if you are a Galileo or so on, you win. But that's not the end. He told me that there is a fifth stage. They will take the credit. And you see that over and over and over in politics, in economics, in science, cosmology. But that's when he told me that, I saw that everywhere since then. So I don't know if Eric, you remember this, but that stuck to my mind. So that's the real world.
I agree again that there are many difficulties. All of us know about it. Mainly the publication, perhaps the first obstacle is the publication of the ideas. The advice will be insist. If you believe in your ideas, insist in publishing it, but with the right way. I mean, don't try to bombard in the YouTube or in other channels that try to do it in the proper way. Even if you are rejected and you think you are right, insist again and get contact with professionals, submit to another journal, and this is the way. Possibly will take all your life or several generations, but this is how the good idea get. Also, I have to say that most of the ideas that people are defending might be wrong. So beware that that possibly your ideas are also wrong. Don't insist in defending ideas that are possibly not correct. You have to be pretty sure in order to fight all your life to put all to bet in your ideas and spending tens of years.
Not sure I can add that much to it. The only thing I would say is never stop questioning. Always look at your theories and keep questioning whether it makes sense, the what and how, and whether. I guess another problem for a lot of people is being able to explain it in a way that makes sense. There's a lot of complex theories that actually are difficult to convey in a way that makes sense, and some of them are too theoretical, or too not too theoretical is the wrong word, but they're too complex for other people to understand. They're written in such a way because it's written from whoever knows the theory so well that they absolutely know it in and out, but someone else looks at it and goes, well, I don't really understand that. And unless you sit there and discuss it with them, they might get the impression, well, that's just rubbish, because they haven't spent time engaging, or you haven't spent time making sure that it's clear in whatever the document is that you're producing.
Sign up for Paradigm Drift. That's a good way to practice. All right. Yep. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah. We have one more from Eric Lerner. In all seriousness, by the way, people who did sign up for Paradigm Drift and didn't get to present, we do it every month. I forgot to mention that yesterday. So do sign up in the future. All right, Eric, close this out. You got a question for the panel?
Well, I didn't mean. I came up a second time because I saw that nobody else wanted to speak, so there's still time left. So I actually want to bring it back to the original question, I think, of the panel. I'd like to ask the people on the panel, I forget which ones answered this way. I know you did, Martin. The people who say, I don't know whether or not the expansion Big Bang model should be rejected. Those people, I would like to answer, what would it take for you to say that it is more likely than not that the expansion is not happening, that the Big Bang never happened? What would it take for you to move from agnosticism to at least leaning in one direction? What scientific or other developments would be necessary?
Cosmological question to close out the night.
Well, I don't believe in the Big Bang, so...
Yeah, you didn't answer that way. So you, yeah, I'm asking the people who answered agnostically.
So myself, I'm not agnostic as well. I have taken long ago a decision. To me, I don't believe in the Big Bang, so long ago. So I have taken my points of view.
Well, this is the key of the question of this conference, no? To finding a definitive proof of whether there is expansion or not, whether there is a Big Bang or not. I admit there may be in the future some possible test. For instance, there is the mention of the redshift drift. It's a tentative cosmological test. If you are able to measure the variation of the redshift with time of the galaxies, if you are able to, and you do the measurement, if you find that there is no measurement, if you find that the universe is really static, is the definitive proof, a direct proof there is expansion or not. But this experiment is very difficult to take it, to do it now. Possibly, it's not impossible that within 20 or 30 years, with the new telescopes, 40 meters telescopes, we are able to measure directly whether there is expansion, just measuring whether the galaxies are moving away from us, whether the redshift is always the same or are changing. Something like that has to be something very strong. As you said or somebody said, the extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidences. You find a galaxy with 100 giga years, for instance, or something like that, is a proof that the universe was eternal, or something something really impact. But this kind of phenomena that has several interpretations, and you are 4 or 5 sigma of tension, well, it's good to provide some arguments, but it's not a definitive proof to reject the standard model, I guess.
Just to follow up, Martin, why, on a scientific basis, is it necessary to have, why is it not sufficient to show that there are far more problems with the expansion than with the non-expansion for you to believe that the non-expansion is the more likely? Why should there be a different criterion simply because this is the more popular theory? Why do you think that a lopsided criterion is necessary?
You should threaten to ostracize him if he doesn't accept.
No, it's not any threat. It's simply there is a subjective component in the science. You see, you yourself think that there are more arguments in favor of the static universe, but this is your perspective. Is not a universal. The number of counting the points in favor of the static universe is not a universal thing. It's not in absolute terms. It depends on your perspective, and of course we respect to each other, and that's, but you cannot say we have 7 arguments in favor and 1 against. And I can say the opposite. I can say I have 7 arguments against the static universe and only 1 or 2 which are doubtful. It's not so easy to measure the validity of an argument. You can give the argument, but to say whether this is the most compelling argument against the others, it's a meta science what you are trying to do. You can be a scientist, but you cannot judge this. You cannot. In Spain, we have a proverb. I think it's also in English. You cannot be the judge and the part. No, you cannot judge yourself. If there were a God just judging ourselves, they would say this is the fair one and this is not. But we cannot judge ourselves. We cannot judge our ideas. We just propose arguments, and you say, well, you think you have more arguments in favor of the static universe. That's good. I think I agree some of your points, but it's not enough. This is my point. Still not enough. We need to further research.
So for me, if the question is about expansion, my foot on expansion is very firmly in that I don't believe that expansion happens. The problem that I see is that replacing it with an alternative theory, that's the harder part. Finding one that actually doesn't create other problems elsewhere that aren't fully resolved, that's the issue. But as I said, I believe that there's too much in the current model that are red flags that say this is not right. There's something fundamentally wrong with our understanding here. But it's finding the alternative that ticks, and ticking boxes is not necessarily the right approach to take. But it's a balance of where you are, and I think part of the problem is also the inertia that the current model has. It's difficult, and it's in some senses unfair to judge the Big Bang model against, for example, plasma cosmology, because it's not fair in terms of that plasma cosmology has not had the same level of investment, has not had the same number of people on it, and does not have access to all the same data. So you're not comparing the same thing. I think there's a lot of promise in plasma cosmology, and that's honestly where my heart tends to lie much more in than Big Bang. But I'm also sort of a realist in terms of I know that there are problems, and I it's not that I say that, oh, that means I stay in the Big Bang. No, I point out the problems and I look and explore alternative ideas, but I can't say that I found one that solves everything else, and that's the problem.
I totally agree, Gareth.
Maybe we should end on an agreement note. I don't know. Goodness gracious. Yeah, we do have time for one more. If I can't tell. Are you
Bounce.
yeah, you got to point the mic.
Oh,
It gotta
what
go to
about Big Bounce? It's better than Big Bang because there is no singularity, and there is not a beginning from zero. And with the Big Bounce, you have expansion, retraction, expansion forever. There is heavy elements are recycled. Eternal universe, you have more and more heavy elements. It's not possible. The Big Bounce could be a medium solution because we don't see infinite universe means should be more intelligent life. We don't see UFOs everywhere. So where are they? For millions and millions and millions of years of infinite universe. I prefer not to think about it. And we need something that makes a reset. And so maybe we are at the beginning of the reset. That's why we don't see a lot of intelligent life. But if we are now, after millions and millions and millions of years, that is not a good sign. So why nobody was talking about big bangs? Always eternal universe and always Big Bang, but Big Bounce is a good solution.
Isn't it just a bunch of bangs?
It's no
All
singularity.
right, yeah. Let's see what the panel thinks. How come we didn't talk about the Big Bounce, guys?
Well, it's quite interesting. I guess maybe you don't hear about quantized inertia, but quantized inertia may predict something like that because as the universe shrinks, if it did shrink, it would heat up until at some point it would bounce back.
Mm.
So, but I mean that's rather speculative, and I shouldn't really say it at a cosmology conference. But I think we really need to get the closer things right first, like galaxy rotation, before we
But the
extrapolate.
gravitation can become stronger after a while, and then there is retraction. We cannot say there will be expansion forever. Must be some fuel to make the expansion, and that fuel will end someday.
I think that Mike's point is that perhaps there's like before we start arguing about the finer points of like Big Bang versus Big Bounce and everything else, like there's so many other things that are still open for figuring out that it seems that that's the last stage of putting the dots on the I's and crossing the T's. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, if we sort out those things first, then the wider picture will become clearer.
I would answer many things as regards the infinity, and yes, you have in my case, to me, the universe is infinite in time and space and so on, but no expansion. Of course, we have stars, just like the sun. One day it will be explode or disappear, but other places there are stars being born. The same for me with the elements. I don't know how. I don't have all the answers, but there is always this recycling in galaxies, elements, even electrons, in my mind. But as regards the Big Bangs that you are mentioning, that just reminds me two things. One is that even in cosmology, there was the steady state theory of Hoyle, Narlica, and Vrickmasing, 1948. So instead of the whole universe being created out of nothing 15 billion years ago, they did accept expansion, the steady state of Hoyle and Narlica. But they did said, oh, because in the Big Bang, the density decreased as a function of time. But they said, no, they accepted expansion, the Doppler interpretation of the redshift, but they said the density remains constant in time. So they postulate that there was a continuous creation of matter out of nothing.
But no explanation.
No explanation.
Okay.
But not only that, if you look at the history of cosmology, there have been many people who have presented exactly this idea that we are different from the steady state, that the Big Bang exists, is there, but at one time we will get contraction. And then later on there will be a new expansion.
Okay.
And so if you look, the important physicists and astronomers have proposed that. Nowadays it's not the standard interpretation, but if you take care, just give a look, you will find important people that you can, which did have the same state of mind as yours. So there are some, have been some, and there will maybe in the future others, new ones. Give a look.
Indeed, you have said what I wanted to say about it. You mentioned the steady state. Also, there is a new modification which was called the quasi-steady state, in which there is an oscillation of the universe. In the steady state, there is a continuous creation of matter, many big bangs. In the quasi-steady state, there is an oscillation, never getting a singularity, and the creation is only produced in the minima, so that you have something like a mini big bang, then expansion, big crunch, another big bang, etc. There are many other. Nowadays, there are still some models. I remember the dynamic universe by Suntola is also is also a periodic. Penrose has another model, also periodic. So there are this idea is repeated with different perspectives. They have peculiarities, different peculiarities. But it's
well, but here we are always fighting between Big Bang or not Big Bang. There is a medium way to
well,
think
I think
the
that it's
problem.
hard to ask people who aren't proponents of a theory to argue for it. And so I think that if there's anyone to blame for the fact that the big bounce is not represented, it would be us, because we didn't find somebody who stood for the big bounce. So
We'll have bouncers next time.
But I would also ask, what would the big bounce solve? Like the reason a lot of people are here is because there are obviously anomalies that crop up from redshift, from expansion, CMB. Like and I haven't looked at in any detail at any of the bounce scenarios, but what would they present that is somehow fixes those problems?
For the big bounce, you must think about what is doing the expansion and why it will stop, and then gravity will become stronger than the what is doing the expansion. One day the expansion will end because no more fuel, maybe. Okay, and that could explain the because gravity will be always there. So the gravity will start to shrink again.
Yeah, I understand that, but how does it fix, for example, people who see that there are problems with a CMB or alternative mechanisms for redshift? I don't see that it's substantially different from the Big Bang, and obviously people here are looking at alternative theories outside of the Big Bang. Most of them. I mean, I know there are some.
Maybe a CMB is just another problem. Okay.
Yeah, well, as I said, I haven't looked at it. There may be things in some of those theories that fix it. Like I think Penrose, for example, doesn't have a singularity point. You never end up with that. And he has, I think it's a scale inversion, doesn't he? So that rather than it being gravity, it's the length scale swaps. The big becomes the small and the small becomes the big. But I haven't spent any time looking at it.
That is math.
With the big bounce, we shall conclude the evening's activities. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists.